you guys ready to get started? All right, so now we have Valerie coming up with her talk on SEO of if you build it, they won't come. And I met Valerie at last year's Expression Engine conference where she did an SEO talk. That was just really great. If you haven't had a chance to look it up, but really big on building an SEO from the beginning. And so for developers, you know, we're starting to think about accessibility, those kind of things, and we're starting to put those in at the beginning. And SEO should be a part of your build process from the beginning. And thinking about the structure of your site, thinking about your tags, thinking about all that kind of stuff. She helps us out at DeVos Web. We've been able to partner for the last almost year now, a little under a year. And it's really amazing. You know, you'll get tons of SEO emails from people saying, you know, hey, I can help you out. Let me get you to the top of Google, everything like that. Valerie's like, no, it's going to be work. Get ready. And then she's like, I'm going to start off with an audit. So here's like this 35-page audit of SEO for these sites and stuff like that. But she knows a lot. She's really in depth. She can really help you out and really help your customers out. So I hope you listen to what she says. She is from Pittsburgh, but as a Browns fan, that's kind of tough for me. But she said she doesn't really care about the Steelers, so that's good. So we can have a friendship. It's okay. So, all right. So without further ado, Valerie.
Thank you. So yeah, can you guys hear me okay? Because I can't really tell with this thing. And I don't have the little clicker, so I have to run and, you know, advance my slides. So yeah, my name is Valerie DiCarlo. I'm the principal, CEO, president of SEO Web Consulting, and a boutique consulting company that pretty much, I do a bunch of different things. I have my own clients. I work with agencies to fill a void in their company. And I also do website redesign projects for people who come to me for that. So it sort of birthed this idea that if I could get, and I'm not about pitching my services, so that's all you need to know about me. But I'm on a mission. Okay, I would love to be able to get in front of as many companies, agencies, developers, so that I could help educate and make you all understand that if you build it from the ground up right, eventually maybe they will come. And I also would really like to address some little drama that was in a session yesterday about SEO companies and developers, you know, pushing back at each other all the time, and it could be misunderstood. And I just want to say that SEO and development is a collaboration, and I'm kind of I work really, really well with the developers that I work with. And I work with a lot of people. So it's so important to me because I've built my company on relationship. And it's just really important to me that it be a collaborative effort. And if you have a reason for your madness and I have a reason for my madness, let's come together, let's talk about it. And sometimes, yeah, there has to be a compromise. And it's not going to be maybe the best, but it's a compromise based on your business model or your client's business models or whatever. Or so if I understand that, oh, okay, we can't do it this way, but is there a workaround? The bottom line is a collaboration. It's not a battle or anything. So that's important that I wanted to get that out and say my piece. So the mission, right, if you do it from the ground up at the foundation and you implement certain things, if you build it right, they may come. Okay, so let's talk about the different current, because as we know, SEO is changing by the day, okay, because we're dealing with a monster called Google who calls the shots, right? And so right now today, what are the current winning online methodologies that we need to keep in the foreground, not just when we're building a site, but on current sites and on your clients' sites. So everybody knows about the HTTPS, right? We got keyword research. Is it dead? No, by no means is it dead. It's basically changed, but it's still a semantic, long-tailed type keyword semantic in search. So you have to change how you're targeting and how you're using keywords, but it's still very much alive. You have on-page, you have the content development strategy, how you use your content, you have how you use social. User experience is huge with conversions, and mobile is huge right now, as we know. Local, it's interesting because well, we'll get to that. We'll get to the local slide, but local is not just if you're national or global, you still need to incorporate perhaps some local optimization tactics or strategies in order to show up in search on the knowledge graph in different places that people might search your brand. So it's important to do local now. How you're using schema or structured data. Off-page is just as relevant as on-page, as you all know. And I added site health because I think developers, once they build a site, they kind of like, build it and forget it. So I want to kind of make you all aware that there are places that you can go monitor the site health of a website. Okay, so which one of these, right, or have to be implemented in the development stage? Most all of them, okay. Okay, so let's start with the first one, HTTPS. All right, so what I did, and I'm not a PowerPoint person, as you can see. I hate PowerPoint. But everything that's highlighted in orange is where development is involved, okay? So hosting and SSL, if you do hosting for your clients and you do the SSL, then that would be included. But for the most part, we're dealing with the host and the certificates, somewhere else. And so, so here's the thing that has a lot to do with SEO. If you are going to do the HTTPS, and this is important because some people forget one or both of these, we have an issue called mixed content, okay? Everybody knows what that is? Who doesn't know what that is? Okay, well, so it's when you're using HTTP and HTTPS in your code, in your internal coding. And so you're going to have a lot of issues if you're doing that. So you want to make sure everything is HTTPS. Okay, and then I've had, I brought up forcing the HTTPS because just last week had a huge issue that it was forced, I guess again, I'm not a geek, so I'm going to call on you guys. It was being forced at the server side and not with a redirect in the htaccess, and it was causing a lot of issues. We were not getting the secure lock on all the internal pages. We were getting it on the home page, but not on the internal pages. So I'm almost certain, 99.9% certain, that you have to implement the 301 redirect in the htaccess. And don't forget that, because that's a huge, and I can't tell you how many people forget it, okay? So very important, because you do not want HTTP and HTTPS indexed in the search engines, okay? So let's talk about keywords. Keywords are about really targeting the niche, okay? And if you guys have any questions, I want to do questions at the end, but if you have questions, let's just interrupt and make this a conversation. So where are the keywords important? They're important in the navigation, the menus, the breadcrumbs, the URL structure. Your content development strategy is really around a keyword set or that semantic search. It's about how you're using your header tags, your headlines, your subheadlines. It's in your design architecture. You want to be able to have the option to do certain things in the WYSIWYG where you're putting your content. It's about image optimization. And then, of course, what everybody thinks SEO is about is just the metadata. It's not just about the metadata. So all these things are actually within the back end of your site. Now, we could literally do a whole session on content development and how you use content strategies, but this is really around, I'm going to try to stay focused on building a site from the ground up, but the issues that I have come across when building a website or auditing websites is how the structure, how the site architecture is missed, and we get a lot of duplicating content within the website. Okay, and so you have your legacy content, which is a no-brainer, but then we have, for the content development strategy, a lot of people use blogs, okay? And how that blog, oh my God, I can't tell you how many crazy site architectural, people using tags for categories, and I mean, it ends up being, it's not organized, and so what happens is you have different URLs for pages that should only have one URL. So ultimately, you want similar to legacy content, you want blog posts to be the authority, the authority page. So categories and tags and pagination pages. So how you do it is you have your index blog page with pages, right? Just like you would do an e-commerce site is a category pages with products or categories, and then you have usually pages of products and categories. So you have to manage this in a really mindful way so you eliminate duplicate content. So typically categories are no index, no follow meta tags. Tags, if you even use them, are no index, no follow. And then let's talk about pagination. There's two ways to deal with pagination right now. Google has, I have the link on here, and these slides are available if you guys want them. But Google has this really sweet video of how you can handle pagination on your site. And I went through it, and I know a lot of agencies are saying, oh no, you don't need to use robots anymore. You can use these rel, prevs, and nexts. And I've seen them not work, and I've seen them work. Okay, so from my experience, if you try the rel, prev, and next, and you have to monitor, you have to watch, and if you get pagination indexing, okay, you have to go in and do the robots. And robots are, for pagination pages, you want them no index, but you want them followed, because you want all the posts or the products, if it's an e-commerce site, you want the products crawled and indexed, okay? So that's my little tip. I put them both here. The new and the greatest right now is the rel, but I I've seen it not work. Just saying. Okay, now how do we use social? Keep in mind, all right, because in some sessions yesterday I was listening closely. How you're using social is very important because, I'll advance so you guys can. Anything right now that is in Google Analytics, okay, they are monitoring your social traffic to your site. They are seeing how much your content is being shared. They're seeing where people are landing. So it's really important, okay, that you integrate social with your website, right? That's kind of a no-brainer, but how you're posting on social is really important, that you're always doing it with purpose and strategy and bringing people back to your home base, which is your website, okay? If you have only 0.7% of your traffic from social, then that's not a good sign to Google. So you have to use social for traffic acquisition. It's just part of the dinner now, okay? So you want to integrate to social and from social, okay? And so you have to be very consistent when you're linking. Again, this is going further into a further slide of off page, but I can't stress enough that you're being really consistent with your linking to the site. You want to optimize your socials for brand, okay? You want to align those targeted keyword phrases with your social profiles and posts, okay? Really important, okay? Because that's going to also help that relevance to that link coming in. And then you want to always funnel users back to the site by amplifying the blog. So one of my content strategies in inbound marketing is always using your blog as your home base for your content marketing strategy, right? And then using Open Graph and Twitter cards and whatever to bring in the value of user engagement, because pictures, people don't like to read. There's actually some really interesting usability studies on levels of educated people, and they were saying, and this is like, I'm paraphrasing, but they were saying that really intelligent people scan, okay? But the lower you go on the totem pole, they don't read at all. They just don't read. So pictures say a lot, and in engagement, right? Speaking of user experience, so if you notice in your analytics, okay, they're measuring conversion rate, they're measuring engagement from social, they're measuring social conversions, they're measuring conversions on your website. So how you set up goals and what your purpose of your site is very important, that you lay that out and get it in your structure from the very beginning, okay? So, like for instance, when I'm doing a redesign, the very first question I ask is, what's the purpose of this site? What do you want the user to do? How do we want to guide the user through the site? So it's all part of the design and, ultimately in the development stage. So you have to have your goal actionables. You have to determine what those are going to be. Is it going to be an e-commerce or a lead gen, and then how you format the content so that it's easy to read. No large paragraphs, no big chunks of words. You have to keep it very, very concise, because on mobile, as you know, it's all about scrolling, right? But you can't make it wordy. It has to be really, really concise and punctuated. And then you have to set up, and God, I can't tell you, I do a lot of audits, and I dig into the weeds, and the client may have done a redesign, let's say 2 years ago. They've lost traction in search. They come to me for an audit, and when they did the redesign, they never set up their goals in analytics. They never reset their goals, and they never updated their goals in analytics. Keep in mind that Google is measuring your site performance as a factor now. So you have to make sure that that's set up correctly in analytics. Okay, so let's talk about site speed.
Valerie, could you clarify that last part a little bit? When you say they're measuring the performance, are you saying they're measuring the performance of your goals, or they're measuring the speed performance, or both?
Well, both. Well, so in whatever your CTA is, or whatever your goal is, you have to set up your goals in analytics. So they're measuring your site performance, and they know your conversion rate based on the goals that you've set up. So if you set up the goals wrong in analytics, they're measuring the wrong data, and so they're judging your site, and because this all lives under the umbrella of SEO now, you have to be mindful to set things up right. And so does that answer your question? Yeah. So site speed is another issue. Okay. Very, very frustrating. It really is, because it's a lot, and this is where I work a lot with development teams, and we really try to do as much as we can. You've got less than 8 seconds. With mobile, it's just, the time is going lower and lower, but you have 8 seconds to engage. So you really have to make sure that your load time isn't 6 seconds or 7 seconds, or, and if you have a load issue, you have to start chipping away at what the issues are. And one thing that, again, the same issue that I had with the HTTPS last week with one of my clients, they have a gazillion acquisitions, and we had to do all these different websites, not just the brand websites, but all these smaller acquisition sites. And they were also migrating to Cloudflare, and they were trying to chip away. A lot of the site speed issues are at the hosting level that I found, and you have to get the client, or educate the client, that they can't get cheap GoDaddy hosting. They have to get maybe some more robust hosting, VPS or whatever the case may be. Again, I'm not the geek, but I know enough to be able to say it could be your hosting environment. So you have to be mindful when you're setting up. If you are, shared hosting becomes a problem. Yeah, so that's an issue. So code, compression, caching, these are all things that you guys are going to know way better than I do. But I just know that this has come up every time I've collaborated with developers, and we have to start chipping away at every single thing that it could be to try to, save a couple of nanoseconds. But yeah, it is an issue. So right now, Google is looking at your site speed for desktop and your site speed for mobile. So it might be two different issues. It might be the same issue of how you're using, because these sites now have these ginormous images, and that's like the big popular thing. And so it ends up being an issue for mobile, again, from my experience. So Google is basically, by the end of the year, they keep pushing it back. It started like last year. We started hearing that, mobile first indexing, okay, because they believe that it's a user experience issue. More users are on mobile, so we have to give them the best, mobile experience and the best user experience on mobile. And so I can't stress enough, because in analytics, again, anything that's in analytics, and if you're using Google Analytics, scour through what you need to be mindful about, because they are measuring mobile. They're measuring mobile, how many people are coming in on mobile, how your site is performing on mobile, and that could be an issue. So if you have a business model where, let's say, you have a business or client business that has tons and tons of locations, okay, you might want to amp the location pages. So I've done that with one of my projects on one of my clients. We decided to not really, because we analyzed where the traffic was coming from. Most of their traffic was coming in to their location pages, right, to call or get an address or whatever. So we decided to amp their location pages. And we got a huge bump, okay, in our mobile visitors. Mobile is number one of their traffic acquisition. So that's just something to be mindful about. Yeah, so these are all no-brainers: responsive design, load speed, and consider, I amped my blog. So I get most of my traffic on my blog, so I amped my blog on my website. You don't have to amp the whole site.
I have a question about that. I've read some articles with pushback saying that, ultimately AMP is Google hosted, so you're not actually receiving a hit to your site. Are you saying that it does count as a hit to your site?
It does.
Even though it's hosted by Google?
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
I have a question about the difference between, or using the mobile version. I have a client who stripped down almost all of their content for their mobile users, so it's just like the location map and the time they're available, their contact information, because that's what their user was primarily looking for when they were on their mobile phone. Because they're a manufacturer, so everything else was, you're not looking at your mobile phone for their kind of content. Is that going to affect their, like, all their keywords are on pages that are not showing up on their mobile version? Is that going to impact their long-term?
Is it a separate mobile site, or is it it's just a stripped down version of their mobile?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think I would probably need to know a little bit more information, but my knee-jerk reaction is it's probably not a good idea to strip out all the content, because the whole thing about responsive design is Google wants the user to still see content. They want the user to still know what this site is about, and they don't want too much stripping, especially of content. There are things like that will strip, for instance, this client that has all these locations. At the bottom of their desktop, they have all these locations in the footer. We strip that out of mobile. We don't need that on mobile. So that's not really going to ding them. But the legacy content and stuff like that, it would, yeah.
It's all their products, all their above pages, like, their team members, none of that is, they didn't want any of that available.
I think it would just depend on what it is. I'd have to know more details, yeah, to assess, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about local. Okay, so as everybody knows, when you go to Google, it's all about local, and they give you the results in your location first. So if you have a client or a company or your company and you want to have the brand come up in local search or just on your name, right? You want to have location information accessible. So a lot of companies, like that manufacturer, for instance, they might want to do a geo functionality on their website, so the user can go immediately. They're given that particular location right when they land on the site. Okay, so that's a thing that would be very, very helpful from a user experience point of view. And I can't stress enough that this is something that's so messed up. I can't even tell you how messed up it is. You know, how you brand, what your name, address, and phone, that's what NAP is. It has to be consistent on all your different directory properties, your website, your social, everywhere that you list an address has to be consistent across all channels, okay? And the reason why this is important is because you can't allow, Google is just a computer, it's just this thing. It's not a person. So you have to, you can't let it guess, okay? That's the issue with duplicate content, right? Everybody talks about duplicate content. You don't get penalized for duplicate content, but the issue is that you're making Google guess, and you don't want to make Google guess. You just want to give it to them. So NAP is the same way. You may have to make sure that across all channels that you're consistent. And that way, for instance, when you have a Google My Business or a Bing Places or a Yelp or whatever, that you're providing more authority to that listing, okay? If it's not consistent, you're diluting that authority to those locations. Yeah. Oh, 5 minutes? Oh, God, really? Okay. Okay, so how do we do that? We do it through basically on the website. You optimize your website. You optimize maybe a hyperlink to maps. And you use Schema, okay? A lot of people forget to use Schema. I don't know why. It's such a no-brainer. But if you also are a business or you have clients that have a lot of reviews, you might want to include aggregate rating, okay? To get the 5-star array, or the star rating in the SERPs. Okay, I'm gonna start blasting through. Okay, so adding Schema is basically, everybody knows what Schema is, right? Because you guys are all the techno guys. So I add Schema to, and you can add different Schema to different pages on your site, right? You can have local business Schema on your home page. You can have blog posts on your blog pages, products, events, reviews, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, off page, real quick, okay? So part of the content marketing strategy or inbound marketing is all about, getting more external links from other sites. So I can't stress enough, in order to build that authority to your site that you need, you have to be very consistent with your linking structure. So if you've recently moved to HTTPS, you have to change to HTTPS when you're linking. If you don't use the www, then don't use the www when you're externally linking. Okay, if you have anybody clicking in, just make sure it's consistent with however your website is answering. That's the general rule. How your website is answering, that's how you should be externally linking. Okay, because that is what ultimately will help your SEO and make your site more buoyant in the engines, is to have that relevance, that reputation, and authority. Okay, site health, real quick. Monitor Search Console. For your own site and for your client site, if you have a maintenance program, this is part of your maintenance program. I do it for my clients who put me on retainer. I'm monitoring on a weekly basis. Duplicate content, any kind of crawl errors, if you have 301s that you need to keep putting in place. The XML sitemap, so important. So many people do a redesign, they don't update their XML sitemap. To me, that's like, hello, it's a no-brainer, okay? Frequency, some people have months. It really should be, updated on a daily or weekly basis. And all of these other things that you can read. Robots, HT access is not in Search Console, but be mindful as developers to monitor that as well. And then I would, and again, a whole other session would be your Google properties. Okay, that's like a whole other session. But Search Console and Google Analytics need to be consistent, like your NAP. So however your site is answering, that's how you need to set up Search Console, and that's how you need to set up Analytics. So if it's the www, non-www, HTTPS, you have to be able to have those two properties the same, and then sync them. Be sure to sync those together. Because they get different data from each other, okay? Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Yes.
I have a couple questions. Video hosting, I've seen there's a lot of options. I've seen some that actually have plug-in SEO to a page. Do you have any recommendations for good services for that?
Well, give me like a for instance.
So I have a client who uses like Wistia, and then we embed the videos into the page, and apparently the SEO is then plugged in to the page as well. But I don't know if that's like the best option or there are better options.
Okay, so what I would suggest is optimizing the channel itself, the video channel, the video itself. And then when you embed, okay, embedding is the recommended thing, I would say, is correct. But then you have to optimize the page that the video is on with words, because Google doesn't see the video. So you have to make sure you have words on there. So a lot of my clients use YouTube, so I optimize the YouTube channel, I optimize the video on that YouTube channel, and then when we embed, we optimize the page that it lives on. So that's best practice. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I think some of the, I think Wistia actually allows you to input data into that goes into the embed itself.
Right, well
that supposedly improves SEO, but I don't.
But how much? Like, it's just a tag. It's probably just an embed tag, and that's all fine. But if it lives, I don't know Wistia, is that a channel?
It's a web hosting.
Okay, so yeah, I would.
I'm sorry, a video.
It's similar to Vimeo or YouTube.
Well,
the
right.
chances that it's doing what you need is slim to none.
That's it. It
Well,
says it's doing stuff, I can't see it.
You have to inspect element and see what it's actually bringing in as part of that iframe that it's pulling in.
Yeah.
But the chances that Google is recognizing the content once you get into that bit of code is slim to none. So what we do what she says, which is optimize, and we actually push people to YouTube for all the other benefits that they get by being on that channel. So she's right.
Well, and it depends. Like, everybody's different. They might want to push to YouTube for that goal, right? Or they might want to push to their website for that particular goal. So the code is
Meant for the hosting side of things.
well, hosting side of things. I agree that it should come from Wistia or YouTube versus, Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Can I have one more question if I could? Going back to the image compression, like he was saying, it's a nightmare.
It is a nightmare.
I've used that tool a number of times, and Google gives you recommendations on what to do, and they compress the content for you. and somehow they do some crazy compression on the images. Does anyone know how to get that?
Yeah, so that, there's other, because I was trying to, for this talk, I was trying to go into plugins, EE plugins for compression, something that could help. And I couldn't really find anything, and I figured you guys would know way better than me.
Can I mention that I can help you? The thing that we do is we run all of the images that we're providing as building out the site through Image Optim. That's one of the final steps that we do when we deliver a site. And then beyond that, what I've recently discovered is that there are actually some compression lines of code that you can add to your HT access. So your host will actually, the server itself will actually aid in the compression. And that's really all that Google is looking for. If you go through like their steps, I mean, it just ends up with like janky looking images and stuff like that.
And I think that's what TJ's talking about right now, I think. Because we could all run over there and because he was talking about, I think he was talking about optimizing, for performance. But I know that so many developers that I've collaborated with have told me that that thing in Google is it's useless. But the bottom line is it's a guide that you have to check. It's a guide to check. This is what we have to work on in order to optimize our page speed. So that's why I mention it, because it is an issue that keeps coming up in my situations too. So.
I still hear TJ talking, so I think we have more time. Can you talk about implementing SEO from the beginning? So how can, because I know we haven't even had a chance to really do this with you. We brought you in on some projects that are already live, but really talk about how can we bring you in, or an SEO consultant, in the build process when we're first structuring the site, and how does that work when we have like a creative team and saying, they're doing creative strategy, they're doing UX, UI. How can we bring somebody in to help make sure that we're building it SEO friendly from the beginning?
Well, a lot of what I said today, usually it can be also at the very beginning. So I usually come in at the design level to talk about navigation, site architecture, how because I also have a passion for usability and web usability, so I've done a lot of trainings on that, and so how people use this site, how their iFlow is going to how you're going to guide them to a CTA. So I go from that point all the way to how are you going to structure the URLs? How are you going to organize the pages? Because we've done that with your projects. Okay, we need to organize. We have to have sort of categories and subcategories for the opportunity also to add content. A 10-page site is not going to rank. I'm just sorry. It's just not. It's not going to rank. So you have to have some robust content. So that's part of the process. So I literally, from the ground up, just start working with what's the platform? How are we going to optimize the platform? How are you going to implement the blog? How are you going to how are you going to structure the blog? How are we going to make sure that we're not going to have these issues down the road of duplicate content? So that's usually where, and then how are you going to structure the content? In the design process, and a lot of people forget about this, but having a headline that says, welcome, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to do jack shit for your SEO, so you have to make sure that you use headlines and subheadlines in a mindful way. And the very first thing I usually do is some kind of robust keyword research to find out what your target is, what do you want to target, how do we want to structure that keyword phraseology on your site, because that could be a whole other session too. Q&A, semantic search, how you do your content with pillar pages, which is one of my last blog posts about pillar pages, how you're linking to pillar pages helps your external, your overall link, your backlink structure. So it's all very deep. We could get really into the weeds.
Sure. So you said these slides are available somewhere?
Yeah, I'll make them available. Are they going to be available somewhere?
We'll make them available somewhere.
If not, email me and I'll send them to you.
Oh,
Yeah.
do you have them online now?
I don't, but I can put them online.
That would be easy and we can just post them.
Okay, sounds good. That's what I'll do. Okay, I know that didn't kind of answer your question, but it is really from the ground up you start this process.
Yeah, it's helping to see all this stuff in the beginning, because sometimes we start building a site, and then later on we think about, oh, what do we need to do as far as categories, or what do we, how does all that affect SEO?
Yeah,
We just start
so,
building it out. and then-
well, see, that's the problem. Everybody builds the site and then they call me, we need SEO. I should have been at the very beginning. I should have been at the design stage. That's usually where I like to kind of, so a lot of times people will launch a new site and something as simple as they didn't do redirects from old to new and they lost ground, they lost traction in Google and they don't understand why. Well, because the developers didn't do the 301s. I can't tell you how many times, that's why I'm on this mission. You guys are the exception to the rule because you guys tend to know way more than a lot of developers that I've come across. So I don't mean to insult your intelligence. I admire and love working with you guys. So if you have any questions or something comes to you, track me down and we can have a conversation. Okay? Thank you so much. I'm honored. Really honored to talk with you guys.